Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again to the next episode of the series. In the last episode, we went over where I kind of introduced the idea of just base classes to the Android components. So in this case, we have the Fragment class being extended, and we provide a little bit of base functionality here. We talk about some, just positives of doing that in the previous episodes, or the previous episode. But something that I touched upon earlier in the season that I have not covered yet is actually this idea here of having the team URL, no, the header image URL, excuse me, as a part of our data class here so that we could eventually load the images that we display in our app over the web instead of and over the internet instead of loading them as or from resources that are bundled with the actual project. So specifically talking about these images here that exist in these view holders, and then the ones that exist, the same images but different image view that exist here in the overview screen. So we're actually going to go ahead and dive into our first non-Android third-party library, which is, we're going to use Picasso. There's another one out there called Glide. That's a very similar, image loading library, but essentially, I don't know. Picasso just kind of is one that I've been using more recently in a personal and professional sense, so we're just going to go with that, but they basically do the same thing. And so if you just kind of Google, Picasso, you can read all about this, what the library actually offers, and then you can actually get to the GitHub and actually see the code itself, and we're going to basically import that code into our project and then operate with it as if it was code that we wrote. And you can see here this little snippet of the, I guess the minimum or the base functionality here. We can get our instance of the Picasso library, call the load function on it with a URL, and then we also call into our image view, and then it will the code will actually go ahead and, or the library will go ahead and load this image into this image view over the network. So we can just get more involved with some, I guess, professional patterns and some, just like industry standard things. So there's a whole lot that is involved in, I guess, this one that we're not going to get into, but the preliminary or the base functionality of just loading an image is I guess good enough to actually understand what the library is doing. So we're going to go ahead and check out the Github repo, only because it actually has the latest version in there for us. So we're just going to go ahead and copy this this line here, and I'll link this in the description of the video so you guys have direct access to it. But we will open up our build.gradle, again, the one in the app module, not the one in the root, the project directory. And we're just going to go ahead and paste this in. Click sync, and you'll actually see at some point down here downloading a whole bunch of stuff. And if you were able to see it real quick, there was downloading Picasso. And now our code is actually in there. And if we take a look at our project and our project view and take a look at our external libraries, you see so many of these Android X packages. And then where is it? com.squareup.picasso 2.718 blah 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 2.718 blah blah blah. So you can actually see here that this pulled all of this code into our project, and we can actually use that to our advantage as if it was code that, or files that we had generated or written in our code base. So we're actually just going to start with the detail fragment because I think it's just a little bit easier to imagine. But we have our image view here, and we are setting the image resource to be the resource ID that we have decided that, or that we've assigned this particular soccer tile when we created this entire list. So all of these elements in the list here are manually created for us, and we actually assign each one of these a particular resource that we have imported into the project. So instead of loading the image via this, we're actually going to go ahead and load the image via the URL that we have. So if we take a look again at, let's go back, at the basic implementation, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this. Again, that's Option Enter to import the library or the package that we needed to, and so we see it automatically done for us there. Get will retrieve the instance. Again, we're going to call load, but instead of whatever that is, we're going to use our soccer tile header image URL, and then into our header image view. And if we go ahead and comment this guy out and rerun our application, when we go to the next screen, we should still see basically the same image, but it will now be loaded over the network instead of being loaded via some particular resource that we had in the project. And so this is helpful because once we convert everything to be loaded over the network, we can actually remove all of those resource files from our project and therefore keep our project as slim as possible, which isn't necessarily a concern at the moment, but it's something to be aware of or something to be conscious of as you move forward and start building larger applications, because you can very easily take up a lot of room. Boom. Looks good, huh? Let's see if we have anything here in our image or in our logs, and it does not seem that we have anything going on there. So I am wondering, hey guys, sorry about that. I just running into some unexpected troubles here, and I actually eventually turned on our set logging enabled to see what was happening, and after taking a look at some of this output here, we're getting a 504 error when trying to load this image asset. So although it works when we just click on it and go to it, it actually appears that it is part of Twitter, as you can see here. So I'm thinking that these URLs that we have for these images are not like just not proper URLs that Picasso can load. So just give me a moment here. I will get some real URLs and we'll be good. And welcome back. I apologize for that. After some deep hunting on the web, I found some very interesting things that I was able to try and eventually seem to get working here. So oddly enough, I actually ended up having to uninstall the application, and once that was done, I can go ahead and rerun it, basically reinstall the application, and then things seem to work here. So this is intended. We are in this broken state, however the logs are still enabled, and so it says here permission denied, missing internet permission, and I actually commented this back out in our manifest file, and so if we comment that back in, we actually now have everything that we need, and hopefully this makes sense. But this uses permission tag is basically telling the system that your application wants some of these special permissions that are out there that are like native to the system. There are a ridiculous amount of them, and they all offer a whole lot of different functionality, but internet is basically one that is required no matter what you're going to do if you're going to be doing anything over the network. So that makes sense to me as to why that was part of the step or that was missing. But then even after we comment that out, again in the logs here, getting a 504, but oddly enough, if I go ahead and uninstall this and reinstall the app with the internet permission enabled, everything seemed to work. And so these URLs weren't broken that I had set up in the soccer tile, and you can see that it actually is kind of taking its sweet time, loading it over the network. There is a little bit of that delay. It tells you all about here the little output that goes on, and then you'll also notice that when you go back and reload an image that you've already loaded, it actually happens basically instantaneously. And if you see in the output here of the logs from the library, that when we first did the first few, we actually fetched it from the network, and then the last two were from memory. So under the hood, the image loading library is actually caching these images. So if you were to frequently load them for whatever reason, it's actually not making a network request every time. It'll manage all those resources for you, but then you go select this one, it doesn't have it, so it needs to fetch it, blah, blah, blah. So there's a tremendous amount of benefits to using a third-party library or using any established library, because writing all that code yourself would be an absolute nightmare, and you're kind of just reinventing the wheel when you don't need to. So know that they definitely are out there. It's just a question of how to actually use them, how to get them to work, and that kind of stuff. So the main highlights here are that in the Gradle, in your build.gradle file in the app module, under the dependencies section, you need to let the project know of whatever dependency you want to provide to the project. And so it'll go ahead and fetch this version basically of this project and bring it into yours. And then in our case, we also needed to update the manifest to have the internet permission so that it has, so that the system allows it to perform network requests. But other than that, and sorry for kind of jump cutting, and it was a lot longer for me than it was for you, but ran into a few issues that I hadn't run into before, so I'm wondering if maybe it's a combination of operating on an emulator, a particular device, or sorry, operating system, maybe the version of Android Studio, or a combination of any of those. But point is, we are now using our first third-party library successfully. We are loading these images from our project, but then we are loading these other ones here, from the network, which is great. There was one other thing that I wanted to just point out here. There is a, you see that a little bit of that delay, so it's not going to be that great of a placeholder, but we can provide a placeholder to this library so that basically in the meantime, while this thing is loading, there is another image there. And obviously that didn't look too great, and I'm not really too worried about that, but the point is that you actually can, provide some kind of image that, or some kind of drawable or some asset that's letting the user know that, hey, this is actually loading, or something along those lines, so that it's not just, blank and then just appears out of the middle of nowhere. So the library itself offers a whole bunch of other things. You can also do the error. So if this image were to fail to load, you can kind of, load your own custom drawable or asset that says, failed to load, I don't know, pull a refresh or something like that. Anyway, thanks for sticking with me on this one. We have Picasso up and running in our application. We're loading these images on the detail screen dynamically, which is great. And we will, I'll catch you in the next one.